Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to find out that they weren't who they claimed to be? That happened to me when I was 16. My name is Michael. At that time, my parents and I had relocated to another city. My father was offered a good job there. My mother didn't work, and I enrolled in the local college. Our life initially went quite smoothly. I made friends, and my parents became friendly with the neighbors. However, after 6 months, the first disappearance occurred. A young guy around my age went missing. I didn't know him as we attended different schools. From what I heard, he wasn't doing well academically but was an excellent swimmer. The whole town searched for him tirelessly. There was a large forest nearby the town. Every day, small groups of people combed through it in every direction. But it was all in vain. The police were at a loss. His family never lost hope. But time passed and nothing changed. The local sheriff personally led the search efforts. He was a tall, thin, middle-aged man named Alan. He had arrived just before we moved there. He was always very friendly and kind to me. Another 6 months passed. I had moved on to my second year in college. The case of the missing guy was gradually fading from memory. The local newspapers regularly printed announcements about his disappearance at his parents' request. And then 6 months later, another guy disappeared. This time he was from a different college. We didn't interact much, but I knew him. He was an athlete and played football on the school team. He was quite successful despite his poor grades. We were all in shock. Such things were out of the ordinary for our small town. Naturally, another investigation began. Alan received a report from the boy's parents. I don't know why they didn't bring in more experts. These were clearly connected cases that should have attracted attention from outside. But Alan seemed like a professional who knew exactly what he was doing, and everyone believed in him. Parents started worrying about their sons, including mine about me. I resembled the missing boys a lot. We were all around the same age, athletes, looked similar, and had poor academic performance. I understood their concern and tried to be cautious. I didn't venture into the forest, avoided being alone whenever possible, and always stayed in touch. Meanwhile, the search for the second guy also yielded no results. The devastated parents continued searching and believing while others had already lost hope. Another 6 months went by. With time, everything started fading away. Vigilance diminished and I relaxed, forgetting about the disappearances. And that was a mistake. It was raining that day. Classes ended earlier than usual, so I decided to go to practice ahead of time. I called my friend and suggested meeting at the location. He agreed and said he might catch up with me at school or on the way. My route took me past a large abandoned house. There were gruesome local rumors surrounding that place, most of which I considered to be mere fabrications. I don't know why it still stood there, but I guess nobody cared to do anything about it. Even if there were owners, they couldn't sell it. It didn't seem like something that could be restored. Yet no one seemed inclined to demolish it either. They say 40 years ago a boy disappeared in that place, and he was never found. That day, he was with a group of older kids. They were questioned, but they couldn't explain what had happened to him. Many suspected they were somehow involved in his disappearance, but proving it was impossible. However, in the following years, all those kids disappeared without a trace. No bodies were found, so they are listed as missing. Some believe they simply got scared and ran away from justice. Since then, many people avoid that house. However, local kids sometimes dare each other to enter and even spend the night there. When those two guys went missing, the search began here on the first day. But the search yielded nothing. The house was too dilapidated to hide anyone. As I walked past the house, the rain was pouring down. With my hood up, I could barely see ahead. Suddenly, someone called out to me. I turned towards the sound. It was Alan. His tall figure stood in the doorway of the old house. He beckoned me with his hand. I wondered what he was doing there. Maybe he needed some help. I approached and greeted him. "Come inside," commanded Alan. "I have something to show you." Intrigued, I followed him. It was my first time in this abandoned house. There were piles of debris and partially destroyed furniture everywhere. Alan led me deeper into the house. We walked through some dark corners and then descended into the basement. It was dark, and he guided me with a flashlight until we reached a strange structure. "What is this?" I asked. Alan smirked. "Have you ever seen a well inside a house?" "No, I haven't, although I've heard that some houses have them," I replied. "It's not uncommon now, but it was rarely practiced back then. I didn't know about its existence here until I saw it myself, said Alan as he began to remove the cover from the well. I watched in fascination. The well was quite large. It was very unusual to see such a structure in a house's basement. We struggled to move the cover. A horrible smell hit my nose immediately. I pinched my nose and stared at the sheriff in confusion. Meanwhile, Alan was explaining this place. You know, I used to live here a long time ago, he began his story. My younger brother and I often came here, but we didn't know about the well. No one did, it seems. One day I got sick and stayed home. My brother, not wanting to sit with me, met up with the kids we usually hung out with. I still curse myself for letting him go that day. He disappeared, and those bastards never admitted what happened to him. Then I started searching on my own. I scoured this whole damn house, knowing every corner of it. 6 months into my search, I found out about the well. And you know what? I found him there, my brother. Or rather, what was left of him. But no one else knows about it. Every 6 months, I avenged those bastards who killed my brother and subjected them to the same fate. And when I dealt with them, I targeted those like them. Alan finished his story. I was horrified. And before I could fully grasp what I'd heard, Alan pushed me, trying to throw me into the well. Despite the surprise, my reflexes kicked in, and I managed to grab onto the edge. My physical training and immense luck gave me a chance to survive, and I took it. Pulling myself up with my arms, I struck Alan in the solar plexus and tried to run. The blow was precise. I had been wrestling for many years for a reason. But the sheriff was agile and a well-prepared adult man, hard to handle. Our struggle lasted for several minutes. I understood that this might be the last thing to happen in my life, and that gave me strength. However, the sheriff was stronger and managed to get his hands around my throat, cutting off my air. My vision blurred and darkened. Life was slipping away from me, draining my strength with each second. At some point, I felt a brick within reach and, without thinking, struck Alan on the temple with all my might. He, not expecting the blow, couldn't defend himself. Losing consciousness, he collapsed on top of me. Barely managing to crawl out from under the heavy unconscious body, I caught my breath and started to get out of that cursed house. Barely making it to the nearest phone, I called 911 and told them everything. Alan was apprehended that same day before he regained consciousness. There was a lengthy investigation, which revealed that Alan had never been a sheriff. He had just shown up and claimed the position. No one had checked. Information about the disappearances never went beyond him. The former sheriff had suffered the same fate as all of Alan's victims. More than 20 remains were found in the well. The fake sheriff received an extreme prison sentence. Many years have passed. I became a police officer investigating murders. I channel my anger and fear from that experience into fighting crime. If there are scoundrels among you like the false sheriff, know that I will find you. My name is Carol. My friend Julia and I love to travel and have visited many countries. However, we have always craved more thrilling adventures. Since childhood, I've been drawn to places where no one has set foot. I loved abandoned houses, impassable forests, defunct factories, and other locations that send chills down your spine. This time, Julia suggested we visit an abandoned mansion. We prepared thoroughly, planned our route, and packed our things. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. We set off early in the morning. The weather was fantastic, with the sun bathing everything around in its warm rays. It was just me, Julia, and the breathtaking landscapes all around. As dusk fell, we sped down the deserted road, our favorite songs playing in the background. Nothing hinted at what was about to happen. Near a gas station, the car suddenly started skidding, and I began to lose control. Stopping by the gas station, tired from the long drive, all I wanted was to rest. But instead, I got out to check the car. Meanwhile, Julia decided to look at the map and find the nearest place to rest. She carefully studied the map, trying to match it with the surrounding area. It was good we had brought paper maps, as there was no signal here for some reason. It was unpleasant to be stuck on a virtually empty road, especially considering we had only seen 2 cars in the past 3 hours, and it was getting close to night. Inspecting the car, I quickly realized the cause of the problem. The tires were punctured. How did this happen? A low male voice broke my thoughts. "Hey ladies, need some help?" It was a police officer who had come out of the store in the parking lot. Only now did I notice the police car nearby. He approached us, smiling and showing his badge. "What happened?" he asked. "Our tires somehow got punctured," I replied. "I see. This is an easy fix. Probably some hooligans put something on the road. By the way, I'm Ben," he said, still smiling. "I'm Carol, and this is my friend Julia," I replied. "Nice to meet you," Ben said cheerfully. "Well, you won't be able to drive now. Let me take you to my place. It's not far. I'll send your car for repairs. I know someone who's good with cars. You can pick it up in the morning as good as new." Honestly, this arrangement didn't suit us at all. We didn't want to go to an unknown place with an unknown person at night. But then again, he was a police officer. Ben was very polite and didn't seem suspicious. And we had no other options. We couldn't stay in the parking lot overnight. Julia and I exchanged glances and hesitantly agreed. Ben smiled again and led us to the police car. We got in the back. "What would you like to drink? Maybe tea, coffee, or something stronger?" Our new acquaintance grinned, starting the car. "It won't take long. You can have dinner and spend the night at my place." The drive was indeed short. We arrived at a small house. It was strange that it was in the middle of a deserted area. Only the parking lot we left from and the forest were nearby. Or maybe it just seemed that way because of the trees. Julia and I stood hesitantly at the entrance. I felt extremely uneasy, and Julia was openly scared. "Come on in, dear guests. Don't upset old Ben," our new acquaintance lamented. Forcing myself, I stepped inside, followed hesitantly by Julia. The house was dark and quiet, and very stuffy. It seemed Ben didn't like airing out the place. Our new acquaintance followed us immediately. With confident steps, he walked into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and switched on the light. We were supposed to feel calmer, but we didn't. "Hey girls, could you bring some matches from the basement? I always forget to bring them up," Ben called out. We hesitated, looking at the basement door. We didn't want to go there at all, but it would be rude to refuse someone helping us. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed Julia's hand and opened the basement door. It was pitch black inside. To light our way, I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Julia walked beside me. As soon as we descended, the door above slammed shut. "Sit tight, sweethearts. Behave yourselves," Ben's voice echoed. "Open the door!" Julia screamed. I quickly turned around and ran up. We banged on the door, screaming hysterically. But Ben paid us no attention, whistling something to himself. Julia started to have a panic attack. She cried non-stop, lamenting that this was the end, and we shouldn't have gone on these crazy trips looking for trouble. I tried to keep myself composed and maintain a clear mind. First, I calmed Julia down by slapping her face. This helped her gather herself. I told her we needed to find another way out. Using our phones, which still had no signal, we started searching the basement. It was cluttered with old junk piled to the ceiling. The more we explored the basement, the closer we got to panic. There was no escape route. I silently swore this would be my last trip. I was ready to give up everything just to get home. And then, my prayers were answered. We saw a small window in the wall. I helped Julia climb up, and she managed to break the glass with her phone. Carefully removing the shards, my friend, now encouraged, worked quickly. At that moment, we heard the door upstairs opening. "Girls!" Ben called playfully. "I have a surprise for you." In a panic, I started scrambling up the pile of junk towards the window. Julia used all her strength to help me climb. Then she crawled through the broken window. Ben, now descending the stairs, shouted when he saw his captives escaping. I managed to get through just before he could grab my leg. We ran like hell. Reaching the fence, we saw Ben's car. That creep hadn't locked it. Not believing our luck, Julia jumped into the driver's seat, and I got in beside her. As she floored the gas, Ben barely managed to fling open the house door. We drove for a long time through unknown territory. Fortunately, we had enough gas, and there were maps in the glove compartment. By morning, we reached the nearest police station and told them everything. It turned out the car we arrived in had been sought after for a long time. The documents and police badge in the name of Ben Smith were fake. The fake policeman was immediately put on the wanted list. Julia and I never went on such trips again, deciding to stick to tourist routes. Recently, I checked my mailbox and found a letter with no return address. Inside was a note. "Hello, sweetheart. Missed me? I sure missed you. You and your friend behaved very badly. My name is Jennifer, and I'm a second-year college student. I'm studying to become a lawyer and hope to be a good attorney. I've always considered myself someone who can find a way out of any situation. However, recently something happened that knocked me off course and made me distrustful of people, especially law enforcement, though they weren't at fault. After what I've been through, I often think that I no longer want to be a lawyer. It all happened very recently. The incident was even written about in the local newspaper. It's because the person who offered to help me turned out not to be who he claimed to be. It was a sunny, windless day. College had just started its break, so I went to visit my parents who live near a forest in Illinois. As a child, I often went mushroom hunting with them and thought it would be nice to go today. So, without hesitation, I headed into the forest. Of course, I didn't ignore the rules. I took my phone and a compass with me. Besides, I felt I knew the area well enough to navigate on my own. At first, the walk was enjoyable. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and I was enjoying nature. However, as I ventured deeper into the forest, I noticed that the paths were becoming more tangled and less distinct. Soon it was clear that I was completely lost. Panic set in. I began wandering through the forest, but all my attempts to find a way out only led me deeper into the endless greenery. The forest seemed alive, as if it was drawing me in and not letting me leave its bounds. Remembering my phone and compass, I took them out of my backpack. Inside, my heart sank. There was no signal, and the compass turned out to be broken. Of course, it was quite old and hadn't been used in a long time. I hadn't thought to check it before setting out. Time passed slowly, and I realized I wouldn't be able to find a way out on my own. I might have to spend the night in the forest. The thought terrified me. But then, almost magically, I noticed a figure approaching me from deep within the woods. As the figure drew closer, I saw that it was a police officer. What an unusual encounter. I wondered what he was doing in the middle of the forest. Surely he wasn't picking mushrooms. Yet I hoped he would help me find my way out of this place. "Good day," said the officer with a smile. "My name is Rick. Are you lost?" "Yes, I'm lost," I replied with relief. "Could you help me find a way out?" Rick nodded and suggested I follow him. He led me along an overgrown trail which, he said, would lead us out of the forest. I was grateful for the help and followed him, confident that soon I would be back near home. However, as we went further, my unease grew. The officer was leading me deeper without stopping or answering my questions. He seemed nervous. His movements were abrupt and tense. I didn't know what to do. Should I run? But where could I run in the middle of the forest that frightened me as much as this strange cop? After some time, we reached an abandoned house. It seemed people had lived here once. But now it was an empty, semi-ruined building. Rick silently gestured for me to enter. My heart raced, but I didn't dare refuse the officer. As we stepped inside, I realized something was very wrong. Inside it was dark and empty. All the windows were boarded up and only faint rays of light seeped through the cracks. My fear became unbearable. My hands trembled and tears welled up in my eyes. "What's going on here?" I asked with trembling lips, afraid of what I might hear. The officer smirked and said, "I think you'd better stay here. I always dreamed of company in this place." That's when I realized it was a trap. This person wasn't a real police officer. He was pretending to be one to lure his victim. My life was in danger. I tried to escape, but Rick slammed the door shut in front of me. This was it, I thought, barely holding back tears. "There's no use trying to escape," he said with a horrible grin. "You'll stay here, and I'll do whatever I want with you." I pressed my back against the door and slid down to the floor. Tears streamed from my eyes, plunging me into despair. What would happen now? How could this have happened? How did a house appear in the middle of the remote forest, where there's no cell service? Remembering my phone, I checked the signal again, without hope. Emergency call was working. It was a miracle. With shaking hands, I dialed 911 and explained what had happened to me. Thankfully, help arrived before Rick could do something irreversible. Still, the court sentenced him to a long prison term. This terrifying forest incident will stay with me forever. I will never be able to trust people again. Today, I will retrieve my documents from college. I don't want to defend bastards like him.